There's a very long history here that has to do with Metatronics, and it has to do with a being called Metatron, and it has to do with the Anu Elohim. Now, when we get into Metatronics, Metatron, who is Metatron? Where did that word come from? Metatron is the name of a family collective. It's a family collective out of an entity. Now, an entity is something above a rishi, the first level of ascended masters, consciousness collective. There's an entity called Giovanni. Giovanni was an entity in good standing, as most entities are. Giovanni was part of the collective that created the Christos founders races that seeded this time matrix 950 billion years ago. It was the groups of Elohim that were commissioned to Stargate 11, which was Avion in Lyra. They were commissioned as the guardians, the Christos founders guardians of Stargate 11, that became convoluted, code convoluted, which began their downfall, both genetically, template-wise, and of consciousness. That particular group were out of the entity called Giovanni. Because of the fall that took place, the genetic fall and the creation of the black hole that I'll talk about in a minute, it was created 250 billion years ago. The entity Giovanni fell because there's a law of physics that applies. If you are an ascended master being, you have your pieces up there, your parts of self stationed out of the time matrix. You send in X amount of energy of yourself into the matrix. If you send in, and most don't, but on occasion, as an ascended master collective will send in more than a natural proportion of its energy into the matrix, say for a salvage mission. If the salvage team you sent in goes down too, it takes the whole collective down. So there was an entity that fell as a result of what took place 250 billion years ago. Well, right now we're dealing with self-appointed creator gods from a fallen matrix that have painstakingly, over a very long period of the illusion of linear time, created a technology. Now, the lens of the eye of Metatron was only the beginning of what became a nightmare. It's a nightmare we've all been living. Planetary system, dimensional system by dimensional system. The Wesedex managed to create wormhole links through using this particular mathematics and crystal technology that were referred to as the Metatronic seed atoms, putting them in the stargates between Phantom and here. They linked through the halls of Amente before the halls of Amente were there. In fact, the halls of Amente were created later because of this. They were the natural stargates in our system. They began to seed them with the Metatronic atoms, which meant there is a bridge, that arc. They created arcs of frequency that would run from Wesedeck Matrix through our stargates into Phantom. And eventually, what their ultimate goal was to do it all the way down from D11 all the way down to D1, link all the systems together, and then use the power to pull both of them into their matrix. So you could pull this time matrix down, literally break it off from its D12 connection at 11.5, the Metatronic eye, and reverse its whole mathematical coding, and reverse Phantom, and pull everything in them into the Metatronic imprint. That would be permanent if that were to happen. So of course the founders knew from the beginning that that was not going to be allowed to happen. There would be the sweep of the great cosmic cycle that would come through and open all of the highest gates and reset the D12 divine blueprint. What that would do would create a polarization wave that would separate anything that didn't belong in this divine blueprint originally and didn't have 30% of its original divine blueprint left because it had the Metatronic override, would be taken in to the Metatronic system. The Metatronic races blame the founders for this. They take no responsibility for the fact that they're the ones that created this darn blasphemy of science themselves. They sealed their own destiny when they created the Metatronic distortion. And at this point, they are simply trying to feed on whatever's available. They've done an amazing thing, but the sophistication of intelligence or intellect that these beings have to be able to take science. They're not just moving bodies around, they're moving galaxies around. They're moving suns. They're connecting suns to suns to suns through stargates. But they're living a reality where they're creator gods. And they have gods. There's a couple popular ones. One is called Jehovah. Another one is called Ahala. Gives you an idea of some of the gods here. There's another one called Brahma. There's several. And these are like D11. They call them D11 dark avatars. They're avatar collectives. D11, 11.5 at the highest level of them. That 0.5 they get from plugging into the Metatronic eye. The Metatronic bodies that were created through the programming are very interesting structures. They take part of what would be a normal living biological structure, and they take out certain parts, the mathematics that are missing, or pieces of the template that are missing, and they plug in certain parts of the template together that weren't originally meant to be plugged in together. Completely destroys the entire template when it's fully done. There's not 30% left where you can do bioregenesis to plug it back into its natural divine blueprint. It creates an atrocity. It creates something other than what was originally created in the Christos vein, and it creates something that is not compatible with the mathematics or the scalar frequencies of the Christos divine blueprint for this matrix or any other one. So in making a choice to be immortal, they made a choice to be finite, because their immortality is dependent on sucking energy from living things, living matrices. The Metatronic bodies are frightening things in a way, because the races that agreed to participate in order to have short-term immortality in exchange for eternal life, they sentenced themselves to that destiny, the path of Arimathea that was originally intended as a path of evolution, a faster path of evolution back into Christendom, became the path of de-evolution. It became the path of the Metatronic imprint, which has no alternative but to return to source through implosion. Now, there are vast races there at this point, because the evolution has gone for so long. There are many, many races that originally started out as a handful of races of Draconian, Weesadek. Now, Weesadeks were the ones who originally weren't even part of this matrix. They had fallen from another collective and created that black hole system, that ours got hooked into. And Danu Elohim. All of these races, there's just a small amount of them from the higher density fields, the higher dimensional fields, like D11, D10. Once they had made the Metatronic promise, and they had allowed their templates to be recoded, they created spawn. They created more of themselves. They, just like the creator gods, just like Source, created the Ascended Masters, and the Ascended Masters created the Rishi, and the Rishi created the Avatars and the Christos Founders races, and they created us down here. They decided, well, now we've got our own universe. We're masters of the universe now. Now we're God over here. And they began to create and populate their matrix with more and more races that had to feed off other living races in order to sustain their matrix. So at this point, there are many, many races there. The races of Phantom Matrix, once they became combined with the Weesadek Matrix, became a force of what, on this planet and many others, is known as the Antichrist. It is a collective, it's not just a singular. Survival of the fittest is one of the things that happens when a race realizes it's finite. And the only way it can sustain and not implode and not be blown back to space dust is to take energy from something else. It will.